Hey, welcome to the 40 Finance channel, everybody. My name's Jeff Beers. Today I'm going to do some price targets for a stock that I own, Etsy. Etsy just came out with an earnings report, so we have some new data to look at and try to determine where will Etsy land at the end of 2021. Keep in mind that my stock market picks and projections, they're just my opinion for your entertainment. But if you enjoy stock market analysis like this, then please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like. Thank you to everybody who is supporting the channel. Okay, if you missed the Etsy earning report there on May 5th, they came in with a GAAP EPS of $1. That beat expectations by 12 cents. Revenue of $550 million, beat by 20 million. And that was actually up 141% year over year. Now, when we look back to the pandemic, we know that Etsy benefited from a surge in e-commerce. Quarter one would have included some of that, although out of the 3 months, I would say only March was applicable. The real comp for them will be Q2, where they saw like a lot of mask sales last year because you couldn't buy them at stores. We'll dig into some of the trends. But what's great about this, to me, the plus 141%, is it really shows a trend that people who came to Etsy are still coming back here in 2021, even though obviously masks are widely available. There's other e-commerce options, stores are open, all those things. So it looks like they're building a strong foundation. And looking ahead to next quarter, the Q2 guidance of 493 to 536 came in line with the 493 consensus. If you want to get picky on the 0.72, I guess you could say that their low end fell a little short of consensus. All right, so the most important thing with Etsy as a stockholder right now is just wanting to make sure that they are going to continue growing even with the pandemic ending, a potential for some e-commerce money to shift over to in-store. So we just have to make sure that we still feel good about the growth story. And there was a lot of positives in the earnings report. So Etsy focuses on three main things, which is gross merchandise sales, revenue, and EBITDA margin. And if you look closely at these charts, you can see that first quarter of 2021 is not only stronger than Q1 of 2020, but you're also beating out Q2 and Q3 of last year, which would have been peak pandemic. Then you look at revenue, same situation, 551 million, that beat Q2 and Q3. And for a seasonal business like Etsy, if you can beat Q1 of last year, this is a really seasonal business, right? So the things that sell in summertime, spring, winter, etc., that really matches up very well for the future. So I like the signs that we're seeing here. Also, the margin this quarter at 33% doesn't quite compare with the peaks that they saw in Q2 and Q3, but it's right there knocking on the door. The other thing that we're seeing here, like on this slide, is the international growth trajectory, which is just shooting right up. So that's a great sign because obviously United States is a great core market, but if you can expand out to international and see growth like this, you are going to achieve your goals much faster. On this slide, Etsy, sort of answers the common question about how do masks affect current sales? And that's really a non-issue. It's been a non-issue for a while, but just in case you're not familiar, back in Q2 of 2020, 14% of their GMS was masks for all the reasons that we've already talked about. And you can see now you're at 2.5%. So this growth that they are experiencing is really transformational, right? So while they had a nice boost from mass sales last year, what they've really done is taken these customers and taken this momentum and pivot them into the core business, which would of course be arts, crafts, handmade items, things like that. The other thing they have going in their favor is the services revenue. See down here, services revenue includes advertising, shipping labels, other. This is what they offer to their top sellers if those people opt into the program. And building this up 90% year over year is definitely strong because at 25% of total revenue, there's an opportunity to make these programs, get even better from here. And that takes some pressure off the marketplace. But at the end of the day, what you really want to see is both of these categories growing, and it just adds more profitable items for Etsy, kind of diversifies their revenue, if you will. So in regards to diversification, if we sort of think about the international growth we saw, the services growth that we're seeing, on top of the standard marketplace sales growth, it's a really good story right now. All right, the last slide here is the growth of their marketing investment. You can see that in Q1 of last year, they spent $26 million. By Q4, they had invested $143 million in that single quarter. And then this past quarter, they put in $112 million. And you can see the correlated GMS on top. So as a marketer myself, I like to see this, investing back into the business and trying to acquire users. Obviously, fourth quarter is going to be your peak period, just with holiday shopping and whatnot. But they're still coming out of the gate strong here in Q1. And it's a strategy, if you look at the results, it's a strategy that appears to be performing at scale. Okay, so that's some of the key points that I read that made me very excited about Etsy for the future. But like a lot of stocks right now in the stock market, Etsy did their earnings call and the stock went down almost immediately after. We've talked about this with Microsoft and some others. And that's really just, in my opinion, because the market is running so hot from a valuation standpoint. But now let's dig into Etsy's stock, talk about where their earnings and revenue are going, and see if we can project a price for 2021. All right, taking a look at Etsy's stock after a great earnings report, you have a price of $157.90. That's down 15% today. The NASDAQ right now is sitting at minus 0.06%. It did, I think, hit a point where it's down 1% total. But long story short, this is definitely not a market correction that's hitting Etsy right now. It has more to do with the combination of earnings and some of the hit that I would say high growth, arguably overvalued stocks are taking as a whole. P ratio on Yahoo this day after earnings has not been updated yet. So at least on my calculations, the trailing 12 months EPS for Etsy stands at 353 right now. So Yahoo's essentially missing, the better part of $1 on this EPS. And I plugged it in right before this video and I got a PE of 45. So assuming that my calculations are correct, Etsy has a trailing 12 months P ratio of 45 at this current price. And I gotta say right off the bat, for a growing name, P of 45 isn't terrible. You'll find lower ones, but you'll certainly find higher ones as well. Looking at the one-year chart, you started the year about 175, couple peaks and valleys, went as high as 244. You are now at your 2021 low of 158. All right, so price targets, where do we land? First, let's take a look at our PE ratios from a historical standpoint. We know that 2020 was a very weird year, and it's very unlikely that the stock market continues at the same valuation pace when you compare it to historical norms. On my front, we're going to work through forward PEs because we're doing a forward calculation, and a forward PE of 45 looks like the low range for Etsy, so that's our floor. And there's a lot of variation in the high range, but I'm going to choose a number of 65. I typically sit in the camp that valuations are going to come down. Don't forget that the forward PE here for Yahoo is actually incorrect if it is based on those other formulas on the previous page. So I'm going to use 45 and 65 for my PE range. Now let's take a look at earnings estimates. Okay, so for the current year of 2021, Etsy uses a standard fiscal calendar, right? So a Gregorian calendar approach for that. Right now, the average estimate is at 307, but what's interesting here is the trailing 12 months PE, the calculation I did by hand, is at 353. So this consensus, I would say, is wrong unless they think that Etsy is going to negative comp for the rest of the year. So we are at 353. I mean, analysts should at least update to that number, in my personal opinion, because Etsy's still growing. You can see that the high for some analysts gets as high as 420. I'm going to use $3.90, and my $3.90 sits about 10% over the pace they're on today. Just for fun, you look at the projected sales growth, and Etsy has over 20% projected by analysts over the next 2 years. So again, not a lot of rationale why this would stay at 307 as your baseline estimate from this pool of 12 analysts. All right, taking a look at TipRanks to see what the best performing analysts think. Before I jump into my projection, if you're interested in learning more about TipRanks, my affiliate link is in the description. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. But we're looking for fresh updates. So since we just had an earnings call, we always have a decent chunk of updates for the larger stocks. We're going to go yesterday and above into today. You have one hold. That clearly stands out. Price target, though, of 205. So what's interesting there is today's price is 158 or 159. So even though it's a hold, it's still coming in as essentially a buy with a price target over the next 12 months of 205. From there, you have all buys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buys. And if I just eyeballed some of these numbers, I'm going to say they're coming in probably about 220 if you added all these up and divided them out, which I'm not going to do. So let's just say the TipRanks average is in the neighborhood of 220. Maybe it inches down to 215. All right, so taking a look at my projections. Today is May 6th. Current price of 158. Current forward PE using my EPS of 390. Again, that's my EPS projection for the year. Looking at the analyst EPS projection, the consensus is 307. We talked about that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. It should at least be 353. Keep in mind that Etsy's fiscal year runs the same as the calendar, Jan 1 through December 31st. So my projections, which would land on January of 2022, that's likely then where they would report their final GAAP EPS with their year-end earnings presentation. I'm calling forward PE the range between 45 and 60. This is definitely the low bar. It could go higher than 60 if the market was trading hot, but I think we have to look at the downside or the low bar a little more closely right now because the stock market is losing steam. My EPS again at 390, that gives you a price range of 175 to 235. If you were going to force me to pick a single number, I would probably say forward PE of 50. I would most likely say the EPS would trend up from here. So 50 times a $4 EPS puts you at $200. That feels about right for Etsy. All right, guys, so even if things in the market continue to sort of trend downward in terms of valuation, I personally think Etsy is still a good buy right now at $160. If you project that a fairly conservative estimate that they would hit $200 with a $4 EPS and a forward PE of 50, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And even if you shave a couple bucks off of that estimate, there's definitely upside in Etsy right now. Of course, you're at the mercy of their trend. Will they continue to build the foundation of their business? Will they continue to see international growth? All those things. I'm certainly betting that they will. and I will likely be adding to my position. My cost basis is in the neighborhood of like 135 or 138, something like that. So coming off of this earnings report and this kind of market meltdown, I will be adding to my Etsy position. It'll drive my cost basis up, but this is a long-term hold for me. I feel really good about it, and I think that there's still upside from today's price. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this look at Etsy. Please give me a like, subscribe to the channel, all the things. Thank you so much for your support. We'll see you on the next video.